Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a new series of NewsNow Podcast related to the upcoming federal election. With me today, I have Mr. Ian Bingham, who is the Niagara West, I was going to say Glenbrook, but that's a flashback there, sorry. Niagara West candidate for the Liberal Party here. And we're just going to be talking about Ian and his background and some of the issues facing the riding and all of us on different levels. Welcome, Ian. Glad you could come in at short notice and appreciate that.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Mike, as always. And no, I'm not a time traveler, but I am excited to look to the future with you regarding this riding.
Very good. Maybe you could just start by giving people a little bit of background on yourself.
Absolutely. So, Mike, a little bit about me. I'm 31 years old. I live over on Garden Street in Grimsby. And what do I do for work? I'm a criminal defense lawyer, which means that I'm in and out of the courts all day. I defend clients in various levels of the court system. Most of my clients, about 90%, Mike, are registered as special needs, so they either have mental health or addiction issues or homelessness issues. And so I'm in and out of the jails a lot, and that's a lot of what I'm exposed to. And also what colors my view on how we need to improve Canada. Before that, Mike, I was an intelligence officer in the Navy. I was deployed in 2016 to the Middle East, and I saw a lot of conflict there, but also when I came back, I learned to appreciate even more what a great country this is and a beautiful riding Niagara West is. So for your listeners, I just want to say, if you haven't traveled a lot, just know that we are very lucky, and that's really what we're fighting to protect in this election is our values.
That's very true. That if people traveled more, they would appreciate what is here. Because when you go to other countries and you see various states of whether it's transportation or water, or, really basic stuff, we're very lucky, as you say. So you mentioned being in the Middle East, and we'll just, before we circle locally, a major issue of the last few weeks was the situation with Afghanistan and were things done right, not right. Maybe, and I know the Prime Minister took some heat over some of the things in terms of organizing the removal, extraction maybe is a better term. What would you say, there's been some critics there, so what is your position on how things were dealt with there?
Yeah, we've had this question come up a few times,
I'm
Mike.
sure.
It's the whole thing is tragic. I mean, the reality is, you're right. I was there. Part of my job was to do counterterrorism activity against ISIS, against Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups, Al-Shabaab, for example. And they all operate the same way. The agenda is terror and the strategy is fear. And people call it liberal failure, but if you'd been out there, if you've interacted with those groups before, you know that we can't blame Canadians for what happened. That is the Taliban, a terrorist organization, taking back territory. So I don't see it as a liberal failure. I was happy to see that we got out more personnel than the States did in a quicker amount of time. I think that's promising. But overall, I mean, if that's something that you feel is a Canadian failure, then that's one more reason, Mike, to send me to the House of Commons, because I have experience with that type of work, and I'm certainly would look forward to working in portfolios in the future, because I can tell you what, the world is going to be very unstable. I think in the next couple decades, it has been, but I think it will continue to as resources affect climate change and other issues arise. More secularism, more extremism. Look what we saw in the States under Trump. Some of the countries are sliding backwards. So I would be prepared to go to Ottawa and fight for not only our rights here in Niagara West, but also lend my experience to those sort of crises overseas. In terms of the broader question of immigration, Mike, which I think flows naturally from that issue, the Liberals, in my opinion, have a very good track record of bringing in people from other countries. Look at the Syrian refugees. It's ironic, I'll just point a finger at the Conservatives here, Mike, is that when the Syrian refugees came over, that was really bad and was a negative thing. But now been criticized by Mr. Allison because not enough Afghan people were brought in. So there's a little bit of double talk there. But overall, my value is get people to safety if we can. Have Canada as a peacekeeping force. That's something we're well known for, something I know Justin Trudeau wants us to go back to. And in my experience over in the Middle East, I can tell you, we have a great reputation. It's sterling. When I went around in uniform with a Canadian flag on my chest, there's one on the arm and one on the chest, it's a totally different reaction you get from locals than the Americans. So just know that even though we in Canada maybe think we're small, only 30 million people, who are we to the rest of the world? Believe me, we are leaders. We are leaders for the rest of the world, the developing world, and what we do in this next election will be watched by more than just the eyes of our nation. And I know I sort of circled around a few topics there, Mike, but overall, some of the Liberal, I have my notes here, some of the Liberal promises in terms of helping with immigration in the future, growing and improving the global talent stream. We're going to be introducing a new labor mobility tax credit to allow workers, immigration workers, to deduct up to $4,000, and an economic mobility pathway to welcome 2,000 skilled refugees to fill labor shortages in in-demand sectors such as healthcare. So these are just some of the things, Mike, but were there any follow-up questions from that?
Yeah, well, in amongst there, you mentioned about people's rights and things like that. And so, I'm going to segue into the passport issue, or non-passport issue, if you will, because, it's, who's not talking about that on one level at a kitchen table in every corner of the country. So, I know just looking at Ontario, you go a few weeks back, Ford called out Trudeau because he thought there should be a national program. And, you can have localized needs relating to a passport. But when you mention about bringing refugees in or international travel, I don't instill any opinion here. That's not my point. But you'd think you'd need a national scale set of criteria for dealing with passports and quarantine situations and all that kind of stuff. So by not taking an action, and some provinces believing that there's a need, Quebec and Ontario, for examples, they've gone ahead and taken action, and they would have liked to see the Prime Minister instill one sort of national scale of, I'll say, values for lack of a better term. But so what's your thinking or position on the passport issue?
So that, of course, exactly right, is weighing on people as we get to the endemic, or so we hope, of the pandemic.
Certainly.
Touching briefly, Mike, I just want to talk about COVID as a whole. I think it's important for Canadians to realize how well we've done on this issue. It started off slow, but Mike, we actually have the best vaccination rate right now in the G20. And so I've been hearing some criticism, but once people know that statistic, they realize we've done very, very well. Now, of course, there's still work to do, just like you're saying. How do we follow up? Where do we go from here with the passport? So the Liberal Party is committed, Mike, that any province that puts in place a scheme like you're describing, where there's a COVID passport, so to speak, the Liberal Party at a federal level will foot the bill. That's the sort of incentive and leadership that Justin Trudeau and his team want on this issue. So, Mike, I hear what you're saying, that, why doesn't it just become a federal issue? And it has been in certain respects. Trains and planes and things like that are federal do require, vaccination and things like that. But really, this is a provincial issue. Health is a provincial issue. In Canada, we have very strict...
But that goes way... I don't mean to cut you off.
That's okay,
but
yep.
That goes well beyond the domain of health, because it's economics on all levels. And, it's much easier to hand out money and say, go ahead and create your own, I don't want to say ecosystem of passports, which can differ from province to province and cause different issues with whether it's travel or a tourist's expectation of what is available to them. And then federally, no matter what province, and recognizing that it's very easy to poke a finger at the party in power, no matter who it is. It's just easy to do because they're the ones that have to make a decision. It could be flipped and everybody would still point fingers because it's not exactly what they want. You can't keep everybody happy. But in this case, you hand out dollars, it's localized by the province, then the provinces set the criteria. It eliminates the heat, if you will, to the provincial level, because whoever the government is at the time gave out dollars, not policy.
Right.
So that was part of that's just what I saw by doing that. But I didn't mean to cut you off, but how do you, do you see that it doesn't help create a common set of criteria that, a lot of people were looking for?
Yeah, and listen, I see both sides of the argument. Your point is well taken. It's funny that had it been a look at the climate policy, the carbon pricing that came in, that was a federal issue, and then the provinces rebelled against that. Ultimately, the federal government had to step in and make sure that happened. And perhaps we'll see something like that here. This is early days. Certainly, if I'm elected and go to Ottawa, I've been hearing from enough constituents that they're looking for federal policy, not just leadership in dollars, like you're saying, but policy on that level. That's something that I would be interested in bringing forward if it hasn't been done by the 20th of September. But again, Mike, all I can tell you is when the party weighed this issue, there was more value put on autonomy for the provinces and the value in leadership rather than dictating policy. But your point is well taken. There's definitely two sides to that argument.
Yeah. So just sort of moving from impacts and policy of the passport issue into economics, which that again, as we know, it goes beyond healthcare and into every facet of everyone's life, whether they're going to visit some place or going out for dinner, or you're on the business end of it and what you have to administer as restaurants do, things like that. What do you see as key planks in the Liberal platform to, I'll say, turn things back on or boost? They never really, I guess the economy's never off, but it's certainly diminished. You know what I mean? How do you see moving things forward?
We can start moving things forward by also looking a bit in the past too, Mike. So, over COVID-19, the pandemic, let's not forget what I think is important to remember about the Liberal progress or the Liberal success. Because one thing that's on voters' minds, Mike, and ultimately what this program is for voters to think about who they're going to elect, is that the Liberal Party had some great successes in and amongst that chaos that was the pandemic. There was 8 different programs that supported 200,000 businesses, millions of Canadians on CERB. We got through it. And I'm proud to say, Mike, that 92% of Canadian jobs that were lost in the pandemic seem to have been reclaimed, whereas our counterparts in the United States, 75%. So already you can see the success we've had. Your question is moving forward. I see it in 2 ways. The first is to energize what we had and then invest in what we didn't and are working on having, which is a fully green economy. So already we have the second highest amount of companies with green tech in the world. But Mike, we can be the first. $60 billion over the last couple of years have been invested in green innovation, and I want to see Niagara West especially become a leader in those domains by accessing the grant money that's available at a federal level to create centers of excellence here in Niagara West for that green innovation. An example is in Welland, where I was with Mr. Trudeau a couple days ago, and that steel mill had converted to electric arc rather than coal. So these are things that we can do to improve the innovation of the future. The Liberal Party is also committed, Mike, to 1 million new jobs. A lot of those are for students. These are good jobs, stable jobs, and I'm very proud of Liberal progress. Some people say, Mike, that the Liberals are not economically minded. I totally disagree. In 2019, for example, we had the lowest unemployment rate in Canada in 40 years. That's a strong economy, and we're currently the 9th strongest economy in the world. So where do we go from here, Mike? In sum, we go towards the green economy, and we go towards it by investing in our young people, getting them into trades, and making affordability a priority. $10 a day daycare, housing affordability with a $40,000 tax in, tax out, or tax-free in and out down payment. This is the way forward.
So that's when you're talking green economy, you're talking larger scale industry categories, things like that.
Sure.
For Main Street small business, which is everybody I deal with, there's 10 restaurants within 100 yards of this building that are at least 3 or 4 staff underserviced, and they can't find anybody. You've got companies having job fairs where they used to get 200 or 300 people out to a job fair who get a couple dozen. There's a lot of concern that the CERB benefit has outlasted its need in terms of the economy, because there's lots of jobs out there, and they're there right now, and there's nobody to fill them. Like I've never seen. I talked to the people that run the employment center in all the towns in Niagara West, and they've never had more listings. Like there's tons of jobs, and there's nobody to do them. So I believe the CERB goes till October. Is that right at this time?
I think that's true. I'll have to double check, but I think so.
So do you think that needs to be extended beyond that, or do you think it's time that people get back to work?
It's a good question. To be honest, I would need a little more research to answer that question properly. At this point, I would say we reevaluate. I mean, my personal experience, I employ staff at my law firm that I manage, Mike, and when they were able to come back to work, my staff did. So, and those are 3 young ladies who came back. So, in my view, I don't know if it's CERB that is turning young people off going to those employments. It could be that they're looking for different employment. Like I said, I haven't given that enough thought. But
well, just on that point though, don't know what your pay scale is at a law firm, but typically it wouldn't be near minimum wage or, in that ballpark. So you're talking about, a secondary job, a part-time job, things like that, where someone's going to be in the $15 to $18 range, and they can make more money than if they were actually working by staying on CERB. So, I personally know about 18 or 20 people that back in May said they were just going to stay on CERB and take the summer off. So, there's levels to where it could be effective. And it has been a very important tool. There's no doubt that it helped people survive and could continue to. Maybe it's the criteria that needs to change. Again, research, right? But, if you walk up and down the street, almost every business would say they would hire 1 or 2 people, even retailers, even the small there's just no bodies out there. It's remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, I hope not too many people were saying that to you, Mike, because if I recall the criteria correctly, I think one of the requirements for CERB was that you made genuine efforts to get employment.
Yeah. Oh, I understand.
So
I understand what
I don't want to ask for names, but
no.
what I will say, Mike, is it's better, in my opinion, to be over an abundance of caution in that sense than an underabundance. Because the worst thing we can have is people who don't have a means to support themselves. Because that's when they come into my realm of my experience, which is mental health, homelessness, and justice system, and welfare system, which we absolutely don't want. So I see your concern, but I would think we've tailored it pretty near the mark given the uncertainty of the whole pandemic, and like I said, I'll have to get back to you on a more
and I appreciate that. It's a big question. Neither you or I is going to serve up an answer that's going to instantly plug in and solve the problems of the country, but it'd be great if we could. You've mentioned the current MP a couple of times. Maybe if you could just expand on why you think you would make a better MP for Niagara West.
So I'll start with, and I hate to, it's not bragging so much as it is, I want to be direct with what I can bring to the table, Mike. So I'm someone in the last decade plus have worked alongside Canadians, fighting with them overseas. I work in courthouses. I fight for my clients. I think of my track record as someone who's going to represent those for whom I'm responsible in an effective and strong manner. That's my track history. I like doing those sort of things. And I love turning my mind to policy to improve the best interests of people at a family level. What is going to affect day-to-day people's lives? And how can I improve it? An example, Mike, is, and maybe your question was going to be later, but for local politics, there's a lot of people unhappy with cannabis greenhouses. There's a lot of people unhappy with the congestion of transit. You've probably experienced it driving around for your many interviews. These are, and housing prices and seniors, and the list goes on. So this riding needs work. It's not up to the federal government to swoop in and guess what needs to happen. That job has to be done by the member of the parliament. That's why they're elected, is to fight and represent their constituents. So I would make a better member of parliament, because the last time Mr. Allison tried to pass a bill, Mike, was in 2007. So that was 14 years ago. And I can think of many bills that need to be passed around here. And then the second reason, Mike, not only am I more active and I'm a fighter, is that I think Mr. Allison's views no longer, if they ever did, match with what the values of Niagara West are. So I'll give you some examples. He's not vaccinated. I asked him in the debate last night in Niagara Falls, I asked Mr. Allison, are you vaccinated? If so, why not? Or if not, why not? He didn't answer. He's not vaccinated, is what I can gather from that. This is not what 80% of Canadians and those in Niagara West believe. We believe in science, we believe in getting vaccinated and protecting other people. Mr. Allison's actions speak of selfishness. And the other problem with when we're talking about COVID related issues, Mike, why I would be a better representative, is because Mr. Allison ignores science and on social media talked about ivermectin as a possible substitute for the COVID vaccine. I want your viewers to take a moment to consider the ramifications of that suggestion. The World Health Organization, Health Canada, have endorsed, tested, and rigorously tested the COVID-19 vaccine so that it's safe and effective. Mr. Allison is not a medical specialist. He did no outside research, from what I can tell, and suggested a medication used for horses that treats parasites as an alternative. So if anybody listened to him and tried that and is sick or dead because of it, that's not a good representative. And in fact, it's borderline criminal. So I would never do something like that because I believe in following the science. And I think most people in Niagara West do as well. And the last reason is because, and another way I can contrast myself against Mr. Allison, when we talk about values, there's a lot of new people coming to the riding. And when I talk to them, they're ashamed that Sam Oosterhoff and Dean Allison, people who don't want to see women have the integrity of their bodies, want to criminalize abortion, that's repugnant to the vast majority of Niagara West. So how can we have leadership like that that's going to bring us backwards into the Stone Age? I think Niagara West wants a change, and I want to be the voice of that change, and that's why I'm asking people to vote for me.
Ian, you mentioned about cannabis in your answer a few minutes ago, and I know that there's been a lot of issues in Lincoln with neighborhoods decimated by odor, properties almost rendered unusable at times, several of them, and that the residents in those areas had extensive problems trying to find out what rules are there to play by. They would call Niagara Regional Health. They'd say call the province. The province would kick it to Health Canada, and all they would end up doing is going back and forth up and down ladders with zero results. And then Town of Lincoln spent several months doing a study in the situation to find out how far that they could go in creating some sort of a procedural bylaw with some kind of teeth. But do you see that how the Liberals rolled out that policy with no aspect of it that had traction for controlling that situation was a problem?
I see that it became a problem, certainly, and that's something I want to address when I get to the House of Commons. I see that you're characterizing it as the Liberal fault.
They rolled out the policy.
They rolled out the policy. So it takes two to tango, for sure. And so what I want to do is I want to recognize the weaknesses that were part of that policy, if I can call them weaknesses, and I want to go to Health Canada as the Member of Parliament here. And these are the kind of bills that Mr. Allison should be addressing. He should be drafting these bills and presenting them to the House of Commons, because we're not the only riding experiencing these side effects. The bill was progressive, and that legislation about cannabis, the Cannabis Act, was good legislation, generally. But the side effects, like we're talking about, the collateral damage, needs to still be addressed. This is the role of the Member of Parliament. This is what I want to do. I think we have to remember, Mike, that the initial concept was that the local bylaws with regards to odor, because there are nuisance bylaws that could address this, but like you're saying, we're finding out they're not enough. So I want to march down to Health Canada as in capacity as a Member of Parliament and say there needs to be proximity regulations, carbon charcoal filtering or some sort of filtering for the smell, which exists. The technology is there.
But see, there you're getting down to planning and bylaw, which is either provincial or local municipal. And similar to passports, that's where you've got to have a common ground at a national level and with some ability to tailor based on local needs. But and you mentioned about wanting to go to Ottawa now and fix that, but it's been a couple of years, and there hasn't been any federal change on that. And you've still got those neighborhoods that have the exact same problems, and the only level to take any action has been the town of Lincoln. I cover Grimsby Council. I know there's been discussion there, but there's only been a couple of issues which I think have come and gone because one of the businesses closed that was there. And I'm talking about legal grow-ops. There's other issues with illegal grow-ops. But I don't believe it's been an extensive issue in Grimsby. There has been a couple. But Lincoln, I can think of 4 that were just extensive. You know, when the smell would come west of Victoria Avenue from Jordan, you know it's a serious, serious problem. So there hasn't been any change yet, and I appreciate that you would address it. But you need your party and it's all about political will, right? You might have the political will, but your own party hasn't changed in 2 years.
So part of the Member of Parliament's job, as I see it, is not just to represent your constituents, but also, a little bit like I do day to day, Mike, my job as a lawyer is to convince juries, judges, to see the benefits of what my position is. And so when you send me to Ottawa, it's a team sport. And so once I identify the other ridings that are sharing these concerns, it will be a small matter. And again, the Liberal Party is a caring party, but they can't pick up the phone if it's not ringing. So when Mr. Allison doesn't go down and address these issues that are on the minds of the people here, in the hearts of the citizens here, that's the failure. That's why nothing's changed. You're right. I can't promise that I'll fix it. I would be lying to people if I said I guarantee it. But at least you're sending someone with the ability, the experience, and the willpower to try and get it changed. And going back to what you said before, Mike, about specifics and provincial layers, I mean, the bottom line is Health Canada can impose a smell regulation for an amount of smell that can be detected, or a noise regulation, or a lumens regulation for the light. These are things that are realistic, and that's what I would do.
Yeah. And see, and I don't mean to be rude. I'm going to be turning my phone on to each of the candidates that I'm going to be speaking to were asked to submit a question for another candidate. So I have a question for Mr. Bingham from Mr. Allison. So I'm not being rude by looking at my phone in the middle of an interview.
That's okay. Everything is virtual these days.
Okay. Your question from Mr. Allison. How could you support a leader who has been caught numerous times in blackface and involved in multiple ethics violations?
So, Mr. Allison, the fellow we were just discussing about his shortcomings is pointing the finger at Mr. Trudeau. And the question is, how can I support him? Well, Justin Trudeau is a man of integrity. I've met him on many occasions. He's met my team on many occasions, and I can tell you, in a personal level, he is someone who is a listener, and he shows that on the federal level too, through the platforms, through the commitments. He's a hard worker. It's easy to support him because what Mr. Allison is referring to as quote-unquote scandals are no more than exaggerated or misconstrued instances that every politician is going to be scrutiny of. You can't examine someone's life without finding something to nitpick at. And in my opinion, whatever Mr. Allison is referring to there is certainly not a fatal character flaw in Mr. Trudeau at all. My experience with Mr. Trudeau and what I've seen him do over the last 4 years or 5 years for this country, Mike, the plans he's got for this country. I mean, think of it this way. If he wasn't of highest integrity, would Mr. Trudeau have put through climate action when we needed it the most, the first government to do that? Would he lifted 400,000 children out of poverty? Would he have focused on reconciliation and the murdered and missing and women, Indigenous women issue? No. The reality is he does those things because he cares about Canadians, and that's why I support him. And I want to bring it back to one more thing. I don't know if there's a closing section, Mike, or... I was
going to let you finish that answer and then say, I think we're in wrap-up mode because we're getting close to the 30-minute mark, which is what I'm targeting everybody for. So Go ahead. Thanks.
So my closing is this because it's my principal message for people here, your viewers in the riding. For me, this election, it's true it's about the national issues, but Niagara West specifically is living in the Stone Age when it comes to our representation, and I've told you some of the reasons why I think that. It's time for a change in Niagara West, and I'm talking to you listening to this. I consider you my friends, I consider you my family, and we can do better. And so if I can address your listeners just directly for a moment, Mike. I've been told by some people that they think this is a conservative riding, and I do a magic trick to show them that they're wrong. So you at home, I just want you to do some math with me in a little while, and I'll show you how I turned the riding red this election. In 2019, I ran and received the privilege of 17,000 votes. The NDP about 6,000, the Green Party about 4,000. That's roughly 27,000 plus votes for progressive values, looking for benefiting seniors, climate action, the list goes on. The Conservative Party under Mr. Allison received about 24,000 votes. So if you knock on a door in Niagara West, you're more likely to find someone who believes in the progressive values of the NDP, Green, or Liberal Party than the Conservatives. And so if I'm elected, it's going to be because you in Niagara West unite behind me. I submit that you're going to throw away your vote if you vote for the Greens or the NDP. I like their parties, I like their platforms, but I have the best chance of changing the riding. And if I'm elected, it won't have anything to do with party colors. I'll represent you if you're Conservative, NDP, PPC, it doesn't matter. It's about values. And my values are, and I've said this to Mike and I'll close on this, inclusivity, social justice, seniors, the environment, families. So if that's what you want, I ask for your vote. Thanks for your time, Mike.
That's great. Thanks for coming in. Like I mentioned, it was very short notice we got this all together after we got the paper to press yesterday. And I very much appreciate your time because I know you've got a lot on the go. Thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.
Stay safe.
Bye-bye.